Okay, well, waiting is something that all of us have to learn to do. And there's a lot of waiting that happens in life. Maybe waiting for your birthday to arrive, waiting for Christmas to come, waiting for the end of term, waiting for a new job to start, waiting to hear back from an application, or waiting to get an appointment, or maybe waiting for someone on hold when you're on the phone, or waiting at the traffic lights. We all have to wait. Life is waiting, waiting, waiting. And isn't it gutting when you've been waiting for something for a long time and then you miss it? You know, so you're stood on the platform at the station, you've been waiting for ages for this train to turn up, and then you realise you're on the wrong platform and the train has just pulled out of the railway station, and now you're going to have to wait even longer. Or maybe you've been waiting for a particular appointment and it's taken ages to get the appointment, and the day finally arrives and you show up and you've either got the wrong time or the wrong day, and therefore you've missed it. Gutting. Or maybe you're waiting for a really important phone call, and so you've had your phone with you all day, and then like the 2 minutes that you went away from your phone to go and do something else, that's when the phone call came and you missed it. Well, just imagine what it would be like to be waiting for something really, really important and to miss that. Now, I've been having a think about some of the things that I've had to wait for in life, and the hardest things to wait for. I think for me, one of the hardest things to wait for was to get married to Claire. When we started going out when we were 16, and our intention was to get married. But in that kind of time of waiting, there was 3 years at university in 2 different places. Oh my goodness, that was so long. And in the last year of university, we got engaged. So we had a 9 months of being engaged, and those 9 months just seemed to drag on and on and on forever. And so just imagine if after all of that waiting, when the day finally came, something happened that meant that one of us completely missed it. And I don't mean like turned up late. Claire was on time, by the way. I don't mean like turned up late, but I mean like completely missed it so that there was no second chance. I mean, wouldn't that be an absolute tragedy? So, as a church, we're reading through the Gospel of John, which is this first-hand eyewitness account of the life of Jesus. And so we've started at the beginning, and we're going to work our way through the whole book, because this is what disciples of Jesus do. They devote themselves to the scriptures. And so we're practicing that together. One of the things that is really on John's heart for us as we read his gospel is that we don't miss Jesus. Because many of his contemporaries, many of his own people did. Now, they've been praying for generations that God would intervene in history, that God would send a savior. He'd send someone to make right all that was wrong on earth. And then when Jesus finally came, when the answer to their prayers arrived, they missed it. They didn't recognize him. And so God had answered their prayers, and here they were still praying and hoping, and the answer was right in front of them, because he wasn't who they expected him to be. And John recognizes that for all of us, Jesus might not be who we expect him to be, but he doesn't want that to mean that we miss Jesus. And so what John does is he talks to us about signs. Signs to help us to get it. And these aren't signs like a road sign that says, in another 63 miles you'll get to your destination. Or a sign like a timetable that says, you've still got 2 hours to wait before boarding starts for your plane. It's not even a sign like the amber light at the traffic lights, which says, get ready to go. The signs that John wants to present to you, to us, are signs of the right here, right now, immediate presence of God, the invasion of heaven to earth, that calls for an immediate response to what God is doing. This is a sign to say, it's happening now. And so John has already given us 2 signs. Jesus turning water into wine. And then last week we were talking about Jesus healing a man who was about to die from a distance of 25 miles. Now, if you can't work out from those 2 signs the significance of Jesus, then John wants to give you another sign. And that's where we are today. We're going to read the next section of John. So we're in John chapter 5. If you've got your Bibles, you want to kind of sort of follow along. And so Hazel's going to read to us verses 1 through to 16. So John 5, 1 through 16. And where is there it is.
Some time later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for a feast of the Jews. Now there is in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralysed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat and walk." At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was a Sabbath, and so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat." But he replied, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" So they asked him, "Who is this fellow who told you to pick it up and walk?" The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. So, because Jesus was doing these things on the Sabbath, the Jews persecuted him.
Thank you. Okay, so let's work this out together. The pool of Bethesda, it was outside the main city of Jerusalem, but still inside the city precinct. So Jerusalem had this main city wall. Most of the people lived inside of that. Then there was an outer wall with a kind of like a large space in between the two walls. And this pool was there. And archaeologists have actually found this very pool that John is talking about. And it's exactly as John describes. It's outside the sheep gate. And there are these 5 porticos, or these 5 kind of arches that are positioned around this pool and a couple of other pools that are part of the complex. The other thing that they found is that this pool was actually a temple to Asclepius, who was the Greek god of healing. Now that's really significant to understand what it is that Jesus is doing in this moment. So in this city that prided itself in the worship of the one true God, half in and half out of the city was a temple to another god, a god of healing, a Greek god. Somehow, somewhen, this people had slipped into compromise, and they were starting to look to other gods for needs that they felt their God wasn't meeting. And superstition was that when the water in this pool moved, whoever was the first one in would be instantly healed. Now, what archaeologists can tell us, and most of the people in those days wouldn't know, is that these pools were connected by pipes, and there were pipes coming into the pools to fill them with water. There were pipes going out of the pools so that you could drain them. And there were various sluices that would control the flow of water, so it was possible to stage the moving of the water. If you moved the sluices at the right moment, you could make the water in the pool move. So, this is the closest thing that there would have been to a hospital in first century Jerusalem. John tells us it's a gathering of a multitude of sick people. So lots of people have been drawn to this temple, presumably coming to worship, coming to offer some kind of sacrifice and offering in the hope that they might be the lucky one. And Jesus walks into the temple and he finds the person who's been there the longest. 38 years. Waiting. By the way, that's the exact amount of time that the Jewish people spent wandering in the desert before God let them into the promised land. So 38 years, that's a lot of disappointment. That's a lot of failure. And this man, we're told, had no one to help him, so that's a lot of loneliness. And so Jesus finds this man, and with the words, "Get up, pick up your mat and walk," he's instantly healed. Now just think it through with me. 38 years of being paralyzed, your muscles are going to completely deteriorate. And with just those words, not only was this man suddenly able to walk, but he had the strength to be able to walk unaided and to be able to carry his own mat. I mean, this is a creative miracle that's in a different league from someone having some kind of clever treatment and nerves being reattached and, having to do years of physio to rebuild their capacity and strength. This is an instant, glorious miracle. And if it doesn't make you sit up and pay attention to who Jesus is, then I don't know what will. But people missed it. Now, some people missed it because it happened on the Sabbath day. The Sabbath day was meant to be a day of rest. You weren't allowed to work on the Sabbath. And so healing someone was, by the religious authorities, counted as work. And telling someone to pick up their mat and carry it was encouraging someone else to work on a Sabbath day. And so some people got offended at Jesus. They weren't talking about what had just happened in the temple of Asclepius. No one was talking about the fact that the water hadn't moved, that someone else had come into this place of worship, someone who was nothing to do with the temple, and had spoken words that had instantly healed the man who'd been there the longest. Spoken words that had released a creative miracle that was in a different league from anything that had ever happened in that place. No one was talking about that. What they were talking about was the fact that it happened on a Sabbath day, and they were offended at Jesus. And the thing is that actually we can be like that. We can miss Jesus when we get offended at something that he said, something that he's done, maybe something that he hasn't done. But we don't understand why he's done something this way, or why he says this, or why he insists that things have to be this way. And so we get offended. And when you get offended at Jesus, there's a risk that you can miss him completely. And so in light of this sign that John presents to us, you might want to have a think about whether there's anything that you are holding against Jesus as offense. You might want to rethink some of those things that you don't understand about Jesus, about why he does things a certain way or not, in light of this sign. Now, somehow in the process of this incredible miracle, this man lost sight of Jesus. I mean, you can understand that, can't you? I mean, he's just like, he's walking, and he's unaided, and he's carrying his mat. I mean, these are things that he probably had begun to wonder whether he would ever do. And he wants people to see, and, so he just gets a bit lost in all of this. And so when people start asking questions, he has no idea who it is that's actually healed him. It's just, this guy just came in and, said these words, and this is what's happened. And Jesus then finds him later on in the temple. This is really important. Jesus went looking for him. And the reason was that Jesus wanted to make sure that this man understood who'd healed him. He didn't want anybody else to get the credit for what happened. It was important that this man knew that Jesus was the healer, that it wasn't Asclepius, it wasn't anything to do with the temple. Let's not put glory where it doesn't belong. So Jesus found the guy, introduces himself, and then he warns him and says, you need to stop sinning, because otherwise something worse could happen. Now, we're not told what this guy got into, but it didn't take him very long, did it? He gets healed, and then later on that day, he's in the temple, and Jesus gives him a yellow card and says, hey, you need to be really careful. You've just been given freedom. You've been given a new chance in life. And already, you're taking a left turn. And this guy got offended at Jesus. Went instantly and reported him. It's like, who are you to tell me how to live my life? Well, it's the same voice that spoke to him, get up, pick up your mat and walk, was the voice that spoke the universe into existence. And sometimes we can miss Jesus because we think, who are you to tell me how to live my life? And John presents us this sign to help us to perhaps think about the directions that Jesus gives us for living. See, Jesus didn't just come to save us. He came to call us to a different way of living. He came to call us to godliness. And maybe in light of this sign, we should pay a bit more attention to that call and that requirement from him. Now, the thing that for ages has bugged me most about this sign is that it didn't happen in a side ward or in like a room, or it didn't happen with a privacy curtain around what was going on. This happened, John says, there was a multitude of sick people there. This happened in a place where people were desperate to be healed, where there were loads of people. It was in public. So it happened away from the pool. Nothing was going on in the water. There were lots of sick people there, presumably their relatives, their friends, completely in the open. And yet, as Jesus walks out of that place of need, not one person says, please, sir, would you speak over me? Not one relative goes running after him and says, please come back. My son, my daughter, my mum, my dad needs healing. They missed him completely. How did that happen? I think the answer is that their hope and their faith was in another God. They were watching the water in the pool, just in case it would start to move. And so they missed the creator of the universe in their midst, because their focus was elsewhere. Their hope was elsewhere. Their faith was elsewhere. And it's the same for us. When we put our faith in other things, we can miss Jesus. You know, maybe your faith is in a particular relationship. That is where all your hope is. If this relationship works, life will be good. Maybe your faith is in your credit card. Whenever you have need, that's where you go to get your needs met. Maybe you have some kind of drug of choice, whatever it is that gives you that feel-good feeling, and that's what you run to whenever you have need, whenever you feel low. That's where you go for help. Maybe your faith is in your own judgment, your own ability to decide what course to take. And you just have a great confidence that you know what to do, you know how it should be done, and you're going to do it. But the thing is that when you put your faith anywhere other than Jesus, you put your faith in other things, you risk missing the main thing. And in light of this sign, you might want to just have a think about where you put your faith, where you put your hope. So, the third sign. Jesus heals a man who's been completely paralyzed for 38 years by just speaking over him. And the same Jesus that spoke those words into someone's life and transformed their life instantly and completely says, "Follow me." And he says, "I am the way." And then he devoted himself to the scriptures. And he devoted himself to fellowship with God's family. And he devoted himself to prayer. And he told his disciples to devote themselves to sharing communion and remembering his life. Maybe in light of this sign and Jesus' words that he is the way, we should think about the way that we're living. Jesus also said, "I am the truth." And then he went on to talk about and teach about what goodness looks like and what godliness looks like. And maybe in light of this sign, we need to take what he says really seriously. We need to start making room for that in our own lives. And Jesus said, "I am the life." He said, "No one comes to the Father except through me." Basically, there isn't any other way. We've got to put all our hope in him. And so maybe if you've really seen the sign, this would be a good moment, like I said, to just think about where you've invested your hope. So some of you, I know, you have invested your hope in Jesus. And I want to invite you in this moment just to allow Jesus to speak to you and to just review. Is your hope and your faith still fully invested in him? Or have you spread your investments a bit? Have you started to take some of that hope and that faith and invest it in a different place? Just allow Jesus to speak to you in this moment. In light of this sign, let him speak to you. Where should your hope be? And maybe you're here today and you've never put your hope in Jesus. You've never put your faith in him. Maybe you never knew what Jesus was capable of. Maybe this sign is the first that you've ever heard of what Jesus was passionate about, what he was willing to do, who he was. And if that's you, I want to invite you in this moment and in this time to put all of your faith in Jesus. And I want to invite you to join us as a church community as we try to live out this invitation and this call to follow Jesus. We try to be his disciples. So let's just take a moment to allow Jesus to take what we've heard and to speak to us through it.